You've had a memory that isn't a memory, a flash of a place you've never been, gone before you can hold on to it, a feeling that you've done this exact moment before, this conversation, this room, this exact angle of light, even though you know, logically, you haven't. You've called it déjà vu and moved on. But there's a manuscript that says you're not misremembering a moment from this life. You're remembering a place you visited before this life started, and it explains, in detail, why you were taken there. I'm Daniel Voss. You're watching the Kext Codex. This channel reads the manuscripts they don't want on your shelf. Subscribe, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't 5 separate ideas. It's one sequence. And once you understand why the first step had to happen, you'll understand why every step after it was unavoidable, including the one you're living right now. Let's go. Here's the question nobody asks about being born. Not how. Why you, specifically, ended up as the person reading this sentence, with your fears, your instincts, the things that make your stomach drop before you know why. The Book of Enoch describes souls existing before the body does, waiting, watching, in a state the text treats as fully conscious. And before any soul enters a body, it's shown something first. Not heaven. Not the pleasant version. Enoch chapter 22 walks through hollow chambers built into a mountain, holding souls already being separated by what they did and what was done to them, some in comfort, some in visible distress, waiting for a final judgment that hasn't happened yet. The text doesn't say this chamber is hidden from the unborn. It says the opposite. It's a waypoint. Every soul passes through it, or past it, close enough to see. Ask yourself why that would be necessary. Why show a soul suffering before you let it choose anything? Because a choice made without consequence isn't a choice. It's a guess, and the text is describing something that refuses to let you guess. Have you ever made a decision, a bad one, a self-destructive one, and felt, underneath the impulse, a flicker of something that already knew exactly how it would end? Not intuition exactly, closer to recognition, like some part of you had already watched this play out and was trying, quietly, to stop you from doing it again. The manuscript says that flicker has a source, and once a soul has been shown that source, it can't unsee it. Sit with that for a second. You didn't invent the fear, you inherited it, which means the next question isn't whether you were shown something, it's what you were allowed to do with it. If a soul is shown the consequence before it exists, the text treats what happens next as inevitable. It has to choose. This is where the tradition around Enoch departs from the version most people were taught. Not a soul assigned a life at random. A soul given a look at both directions, the chambers of consequence, and whatever the alternative was, and then required to choose which road it was walking into before it ever took a breath. Here's what should bother you about that structure. If the choice happened before birth, and you don't remember making it, then every instinct you've ever had that felt like it came from nowhere, a pull towards something you can't explain, a resistance to something everyone else seems fine with, isn't random personality. It's residue, the echo of a decision you made somewhere you can't access anymore. Have you ever felt an aversion to something specific? A place, a kind of person, a pattern of behavior, with an intensity that didn't match anything that's happened to you in this life? No history to explain it. Just a wall going up before you consciously decided to put one there? The text frames the pre-birth choice as informed, not blind. Which means the wall isn't irrational. It's a decision your current self inherited without the memory attached to it. You're carrying the conclusion. You just lost the argument that got you there. Let that sit for a moment, because it means every irrational fear you've ever apologized for might be the one honest thing about you. And if the choice was informed, if you were shown the stakes clearly enough to choose with your eyes open, the next question answers itself. A choice like that doesn't come free. Something has to confirm it held. A choice made once, under ideal conditions, with the consequence fully visible, is easy. The text doesn't stop there. It treats the choice as something that has to survive contact with darkness before it counts. This is the part of the tradition that gets skipped over the fastest, because it's the most uncomfortable. The soul doesn't just witness the realm of consequence and pick a direction. It passes through it, not observing from a safe distance, moving through the same darkness the punished souls occupy, before incarnation, as a condition of being allowed to proceed. The choice gets tested inside the exact environment it was choosing against. Think about why a system would require that. A choice you make in comfort tells you what you'd like to be true about yourself. A choice you make in the dark, with no guarantee of getting back out, tells you what's actually true. Have you ever been at your lowest, genuinely lowest, not inconvenienced, actually afraid, actually alone, and felt something in you refuse to break anyway? Not because you were strong, because something underneath the fear held its shape without your permission. The manuscript says that's not a personality trait. That's the test showing up again. It's not a one-time event that happened before you were born and then stopped mattering. The text treats darkness as something a soul has to keep proving itself against, because the first pass through it, before birth, was only the template. Life is where the same test runs a second time, and you don't get to see the syllabus. Which raises the obvious problem. If you already passed the test once, why run it again, blind, with the stakes hidden and the memory wiped? Because the point was never the answer. It was whether the soul would hold without being shown the answer. And that only works if the memory of the first time is taken away. The test doesn't end when you're born. It just stops telling you it's a test. Here's where the text stops being about the soul's choice and starts being about the soul's amnesia. Every tradition that describes pre-birth judgment runs into the same problem. If the soul saw divine justice clearly enough to choose correctly, why does the born person spend their whole life doubting whether justice exists at all? Why does earthly life feel, so often, like proof that nothing is being tracked, nothing is being weighed, and the worst people get away with everything? The Enochic framework has an answer for that, and it's colder than most people expect. The memory is veiled on purpose, not lost. Veiled. The text treats the chambers, the judgment, the visible consequence of rebellion, as something a soul is required to have seen and then required to forget. Because a life lived with the certainty of justice already proven isn't a test of faith, it's just compliance with something you already watched happen. Have you ever had a moment, grief, injustice, watching someone cruel prosper while someone good suffered, where some small, stubborn part of you refused to conclude that it meant nothing? Not evidence, just a refusal, a conviction that outlasted every reason you had to abandon it. The manuscript says that refusal is the veil failing to hold completely, a trace of what you already saw, leaking through despite the amnesia built into the system. Your conscience isn't learning, it's remembering, which means every time you've held on to justice without proof, you weren't being naive. You were remembering, badly, on purpose, something the text says you already witnessed directly. And if that's true, if the veil is imperfect enough to leak, then there's one more thing it should be leaking. The thing every soul, according to the text, was shown right alongside the chambers of judgment, the warning that came with the tour. This is the piece the whole structure has been building toward, and it's the one that changes what everything before it means. The Book of Enoch spends its earliest chapters on the Watchers, angelic beings who broke the one boundary they existed to guard, and were bound and imprisoned for it, their fate described in specific, physical terms. Valleys of fire, chains that don't loosen, a punishment visible enough that later chapters treat it as a landmark other beings pass on their way through the same territory. The tradition around pre-birth souls places the unborn directly in view of that landmark, not told about the Watchers secondhand, shown them, shown exactly what happens to something that had every advantage, power, position, proximity to the source of the boundary itself, and broke it anyway. Think about what that does to the whole sequence now. The soul isn't just shown a chamber of consequence in the abstract. It's shown the worst-case outcome, made concrete, attached to beings who had every reason to know better and failed anyway. Then, it's asked to choose. Then, it's tested in the dark. Then, the memory of all of it is veiled, which means the warning was never optional information. It was the first thing you were given, before you had any say in the matter, before you'd made a single choice, because the system wasn't interested in whether you'd choose correctly with a clean slate. It wanted to know whether you'd choose correctly, having already seen exactly what failure looks like, up close, with nowhere left to hide from the sight of it. Have you ever done something you knew, with total clarity, was a mistake, not guessed, knew, and done it anyway? And felt, in the moment right before, a resistance that came from somewhere deeper than conscience, somewhere that felt less like a rule you'd been taught, and more like a memory trying to stop you. The text says that resistance has a name. It's the warning, still there, still working, even with everything else stripped away. 5 pieces, not 5 separate ideas about the afterlife. One sequence, each step making the next one necessary. You were shown the consequence, because a choice without one isn't real. You were given the choice, because seeing wasn't enough on its own. The choice was tested in darkness, because comfort doesn't prove anything. The memory was veiled, because certainty isn't the same as faith. And underneath all of it, the warning stays. The one thing the veil was never able to fully erase. Here's what I can't get past. If the text is right, the aversions you can't explain, the convictions that survive without evidence, the resistance that shows up right before you're about to do something you'll regret, none of that is randomness. It's leakage. Proof the veil was never airtight to begin with. Which leaves one question the manuscript never answers, and it's the one I keep circling back to. If you were shown the consequence, made the choice, passed the test, and the memory was veiled on purpose so the rest of your life could mean something, what happens if you spend that life ignoring every piece of it that leaks through anyway? The text doesn't say. It just tells you the leaks are there, and it tells you they've been there since before you had a name. The manuscript doesn't say you're discovering truth. It says you're recognizing it. Tonight, when something in you resists a decision for no reason you can point to, pay attention. The manuscript says you've felt this exact resistance before. You just weren't born yet. This channel doesn't stop pulling. Neither should you. Subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.